So you'd think putting an AI assistant into a powerhouse tool like Notion would be a total no-brainer, right? Just hook it up to some tools and call it a day. But what if I told you that behind that seemingly simple feature, there's a wild story of repeated failure, huge philosophical breakthroughs, and a complete reimagining of how software should even be built? Well, this is that story.
Okay, so just how many times did Notion have to go back to the drawing board to get their custom AI agents working just right? Get this, 5. Yep, not 1, not 2, but 5 complete rebuilds from the ground up. That number alone tells you just how ridiculously hard this whole thing was.
And hey, don't just take my word for it. This is a direct quote from Simon Last, Notion's co-founder. He just comes right out and says it. It was probably the 4th or 5th time that we rebuilt that. We're not talking about little tweaks here. We're talking about tearing everything down and starting over, again and again. So you gotta ask, why? What was going on?
All right, before we get to the big breakthrough, we have to really dig into the failures. This period is what the team at Notion actually called their Valley of Despair, and man, it really shows you just how monumental this challenge was.
So, what was the big roadblock? Why couldn't they crack it? Well, it turns out it wasn't just one single thing. It was more like a perfect storm of technical problems that would stop even the smartest engineers in their tracks. Let's just look at the timeline for a second. The idea itself sparked way back in late 2022, right when they first got their hands on early models like GPT-4. But then, all through early 2023, every single attempt to build something that was actually useful, it just fell flat. It got to a point where they had to face the facts. The underlying technology itself was just too early. It was like they were trying to build a skyscraper on a foundation made of sand.
And let's get into the specifics of these hurdles, because this is where it gets interesting. For starters, the models themselves were, frankly, just too dumb at the time. Their short-term memory, the context window, was tiny. On top of that, there wasn't even a standard way to get an AI to use a tool. And beyond all the AI tech issues, just figuring out permissions and how to make a user interface that wasn't a total mess was a massive challenge in itself. As Notion's head of AI, Sarah Sachs, put it, they were literally swimming upstream.
So what changed? I mean, they couldn't just sit around and wait for the models to magically get better. They needed a whole new strategy. And this led to a massive shift in their thinking, something they called the Agent Lab thesis. This, right here, was the turning point.
This really gets to the heart of it. You see, there were 2 ways to go. Most companies were just building what you'd call wrappers, basically slapping a pretty user interface on top of somebody else's AI model. But Notion? They committed to this Agent Lab approach. The idea was to become obsessive experts in how people actually work together and then build an entire product system around the AI that serves those real human needs. Sarah Sachs had this brilliant analogy for it. Think about Datadog, the big monitoring platform. It couldn't exist without cloud services, like AWS, right? But Datadog's genius isn't that they're experts in cloud storage, they're experts in observability. It's the same thing here. Notion realized their superpower wasn't building the base AI model. It was their deep, deep understanding of collaboration. So they decided to double down on that unique strength.
But look, a thesis is just an idea on paper. To actually pull it off, you need a very, very specific kind of team, a unique culture. Especially when you know that you might have to just scrap months of your own work at a moment's notice and start all over.
And here's a peek inside that culture. They built low-ego teams where engineers are totally okay with deleting their own code if it's not working. They live by a demos over memos philosophy, which means a working prototype is worth 1,000 pages of design docs. The management structure is super loose, so people can just swarm on the biggest problems, no matter whose team it is. This is the kind of organizational DNA that makes 5 rebuilds not just possible, but a strength.
They even created brand new jobs, like the model behavior engineer. Now, this isn't your typical software engineer. This is a specialist whose entire job is to understand why AI models fail, to write tests for them, and to get deep into the weeds of their behavior. It's a huge admission that working with AI is a totally new kind of engineering that needs new kinds of experts.
So all of this, all the hard work, the painful rebuilds, the new culture, the new job roles, it's all building towards something truly radical, a long-term vision they call the software factory.
Simon Last has this belief that coding agents are, in his words, the kernel of AGI, artificial general intelligence. The core idea is pretty profound. If you can build an agent that can write, debug, and maintain its own code, that agent can then build pretty much any other capability. It's like the ultimate tool for building more tools.
So, what does this software factory actually look like?
Well, an agent doesn't just write a single line of code. No, it manages the entire process. First, it writes the spec for what needs to be built. Then it generates the code. After that, it runs its own tests to make sure it works. If it finds bugs, it debugs its own failures. And it even takes part in the code review process. It's a fully automated end-to-end development cycle.
Now, when you have systems like this that can do all that, you arrive at a conclusion that is, well, it's inevitable and it's pretty profound. The very definition of what it means to be a software engineer is fundamentally changing.
The job is shifting. It's moving away from literally typing out lines of code and moving toward designing, supervising, and managing these incredible, complex systems of agents. The engineer of tomorrow is less of a bricklayer and more of a master architect, overseeing an entire crew of automated builders.
And that leaves us with one final, fascinating question to think about. In a future where AI agents are the ones building, testing, and maintaining all of our software, who's left to build the agents themselves? And what does that job even look like? That's the puzzle that companies like Notion are trying to solve right now.